Hello everyone, welcome to yet another edition of AFL Unpopular Opinions. Dylan Lynch back in the chair this week. I'm joined by the man who built the foundations of Port Adelaide, Brisbane Lions ball magnet, fantasy pig, Tom Rockliff.
I might have to go back down there, Dill. It's good to have you back, but yeah, they were just touch and go on the weekend against an ordinary North Melbourne team. North were better on the weekend, but not sold on Port Adelaide yet.
Probably.
Brisbane bounced back.
They've had a couple of ordinary weeks, haven't they?
Oh.
Port. I mean, Sydney in the end should have belted them.
They should have, yeah. So they were impressive against the Hawks. Like their first half was as good footy as you're going to see, and then Sydney probably should have beat them. North, you could argue, they got a tough month. They got to go down to Ballarat, take on the Dogs, who are back in form.
Beauty, that one.
Showdown. And then Geelong over there who play that ground.
You'll need to give them a rev up to get the dare I say, the Port Adelaide aggression. That's what they need. Alastair Lynch played 3 flags, 300 odd games. Done a bit in football. Nice to have you here.
It's good to be back. Another very interesting week of football, and probably even a more interesting week coming up. You touched on a couple of games and
fascinating matchups.
Q clash.
Biggest.
Well, to top of the table, realistically.
Well, it's a top four clash.
Well,
second versus third.
Well, Gold Coast effectively are on top if you calculate it out.
When was it? Was it when Adelaide came into the comp? We actually had a
match ratio.
Ratio was the ladder, so they calculate your match ratio, your wins and losses, and so would they be on top?
Yeah, they would. So match ratio I think was in.
It was only for a year, wasn't it, or so?
I think it was during the period when there was a bye between the Crows and Fremantle joined the competition.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was.
Their percentage is 150, so it's the best in the competition. They've only lost the one game, which they shouldn't have lost to Richmond, but they did, coughed it up. And then they take on Essendon. You'd imagine they beat Essendon, wouldn't they?
You'd imagine so.
But the biggest Q clash in the history of the Q clash, without doubt, it's going to be an absolute ripper on Sunday. It's going to be a big weekend of sport up here in Brisbane with the Magic Round into the Q clash. So the
Q clash as well. Public holiday on the Monday, so it's a 7:20 local start. Isn't it?
I don't think you actually wore this version of the jumper, but the Bears jumper's getting a runner on.
Is it?
The Lions will be playing as the Bears for the Q clash.
Well, which Bears? Which Bears jumper?
The Carrara Bears jumper, not the one you wore.
Okay, so the maroon with the V.
No, we're talking the original BB 80s number.
I played in it.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
Yeah, one year we played in it.
What was the best alternative strip that you wore? I mean, was there something about the old Port jumper?
Well, the prison bars was good. You're always wearing the prison bars because it means so much to so many people down in South Australia. The retro ones at Brisbane, I mean, you could play 1 year at a club now and wear potentially 6 jumpers.
Yeah, you could.
Easily. So you got Indigenous round, you've got
retro.
Anzac
some great
down,
jumpers,
retro, home game, away. You've got a minimum 5.
It's a good way to make it's a good way to make a bit of extra coin.
It does, and you could actually see the pink Gold Coast jumper,
highest selling jumper.
Is it? Well, that makes sense because you could see it in the stands on the weekend. It's fantastic.
Also, big fan of the Swans in the South Melbourne jumper with black shorts. I think that looks great.
That was.
I reckon that looks sensational.
First half was good, but they wouldn't want to throw that out after that.
Yeah, they chucked the black shorts
I'm talking pure look. But and we actually spoke fashion on this show last year when we brought up the fact that you had to wear the paddle pop line for a number of years, and we voted that. I'll take that to the bank. The Lions will never release that as a retro jumper.
Lynch was big push beyond that.
Bullshit. That was
Lynchy drew it.
That was putrid. He came in and spoke to us.
I tell you
how much money did they offer you to do that?
Tell you which one was probably the best one I wore. The one I can remember. I think it might have been in my 300th game or something like that. We wore the 1960s Fitzroy jumper.
The maroon and blue. The maroon, white and blue with white FFC. Yeah, that's a beautiful jumper.
That was a great jumper.
The Fitzroy Colts. So the Fitzroy Junior Club, that's what their senior team wears now. That's their
a cracking
official jumper.
I have obviously the rose-coloured glasses on when I think about the old Fitzroy jumpers and the one we wore in the 80s.
I remember the one you bought in here.
Did I?
Yeah, remember you bought one in and it stunk up the studio because you hadn't washed it for about 30 years?
Was that? Was that the premiership jumper?
No. There was a Fitzroy jumper you bought in.
Yeah, geez.
We had to fumigate the studio because it had just been moulded up, and then I think you got your wife to wash it, and it was just this black liquid.
Oh no, yeah,
Yes,
I watched that one, and that was just black. That was putrid. So it had been a few years. But yes, no, the old Fitzroy jumpers are crackers. What I did see actually in the Collingwood game, Anzac Day, there was all the Collingwood supporters with their black and white jumpers, and there was a Tassie jumper smack bang in the middle of it.
I think that's becoming a bit like the random Souths guy now. You know how you see a South Sydney supporter at every sporting event? I reckon the map is starting to surpass random Souths guy.
They're getting there. They're around.
Yeah.
Is Tassie coming in or not?
Yeah, what's going on? I read in the paper today there's issues with Hobart Stadium. Hobart Mayor Anna Reynolds says concerns over the Macquarie Point Stadium are more than financial.
Are more than financial?
Yeah, apparently it's more than financial. It's talking about many issues, including a lack of
three-eyed fish.
Yeah, meaningful consultation.
No, there's lots of consultations going on, but I think it's progressing exceedingly well.
Who do we have to vote out this weekend? Who do they have to vote out? Federal election.
It's bipartisan support.
So everyone's behind it, but nothing's happening. A bit like Queensland's Olympics.
Well, you got the coalition in power in Tassie. Uncle Jeremy. So he's run the show. So he's Liberal Premier, and it's funded by the Labor federal government as well. So. And the opposition in Tassie is supporting it. So, no, don't worry, it'll be fine.
We're on. It's happening.
It'll be fine.
Well,
you'll see jumpers everywhere.
Let's get stuck into some unpopular opinions from the weekend gone by. Fantastic weekend of football.
Anzac Day, they do it well, don't they?
Big fan. I do like the mix now of the Anzac Day night game. I think I know Fremantle's always had an occasion.
Yeah, I played in one of those.
Yeah, and I think they want to make that a permanent thing on the Anzac Day night. I think that's a good shout to get both coasts of Australia involved.
It has been West Coast, wasn't it?
It's been Fremantle's. It's been Fremantle's game.
I've definitely played one over there against West Coast.
Oh, did you?
Did you?
Well, you would have played in. Did you play in an Anzac Day one in Wellington?
Yeah.
Because there was a year or two. There was three.
Yeah.
So there was New Zealand, MCG, and then Perth. There was three on the one day.
Yeah, because it was.
You played about 8:30 our time.
Well, I think that was my only Friday night game until I got to Port Adelaide, and it was a 5:30 game. In Wellington. Well, I think I'm still the only player to play in three.
We've mentioned this. Yes, he's the only player that's played
China
for premiership points in 3 different countries. Yeah.
But yeah, I think nothing beats Collingwood Essendon does it, and that's my unpopular opinion this week. And I've shifted on it because I always used to think that Collingwood get kissed a little bit on the dick with their games. But the stat that came out about Scott Pendlebury playing 400 games, I think there's a kid at the Giants that's played 22 games and played at more venues.
Yeah.
It's a luck of the draw, and I think Collingwood deserve the prime time. The way their supporters... Well, I just mean Collingwood probably in general.
Okay.
They deserve the prime time games because it brings... their fans always turn up, no matter generally where they are. They're a powerhouse club, and they deserve to play in those high time slots because at the end of the day, they bring most of the money in for the rest of the competition. Being an interstate player, I used to get the shits with it. I was like, well, why don't Brisbane get it? Why don't Port get it? Why don't we share it around, share the love? But in a compromised fixture, I think the big time slots have to go to the big clubs, and Collingwood do it better than most. And again, on Anzac Day, they did it, and their wily young fella, Steel Sidebottom, walked away with the medal. He just seems to keep going. But Collingwood deserve those prime time slots, in my opinion.
I agree with you totally.
And it's also a fact that, while you were at Brisbane or Port Adelaide and whatnot, that when your club's commercial departments were doing fixture requests, they would always want a home game against Collingwood for the money.
Yeah, of course.
They're bringing the crowd.
So, they only travel out of Melbourne maybe 4 times a year, maybe 5 now, which is deserved. And Pendlebury and these guys, he's been blessed, but it's luck of the draw. You get drafted there, you get to play in the...
Alan Didak only played at 6 venues in his career.
It's a nice sales pitch if Collingwood or one of these big clubs are coming to you and say you're going to play 16 games at the MCG every year and your average crowd 60. is 70,000 or something like that.
Yeah, Collingwood gets 50,000 at the MCG and they call it a disappointing crowd when at most stadiums in Australia that's a sellout.
I'd love to know the last time they only had 50,000.
Oh, I think, at a home game?
At a home game, at the G.
If we ignore COVID crowds?
Oh, yeah, well, we can't.
I'll look that up. I'll look that up.
Because they are extremely powerful. Well, in saying that, so you talk about that, and that no doubt that they underpin the competition, but that's not taken away from non-Victorian teams with the TV rights and that sort of stuff. But if we talk about growing the game, and we touched on this a couple of weeks ago, and watching the Suns and how the Suns are maturing before our eyes and becoming a very good side. Now, we know opening round was washed out because of Cyclone Alfred. But, so they only played their second home game there on the weekend. And now...
They're not home for 6 weeks or something, are they?
That's exactly right. So the next home game... Well, sorry, they go to Darwin for 2 games. The next game on the Gold Coast, so it's their home game, is May 31st. If we're going to talk about growing the game and making, Queensland a stronghold for footy, and the growth in the game in Queensland in junior levels, male and female, is extraordinary. But I think if you're trying to grow the game nationally, it's not the job of the Gold Coast Suns to be going and playing back-to-back games in Darwin. They need to be playing essentially every second week on the Gold Coast to get that crowd to build and know that we can go watch top-class footy every second week. I think it's not their job to play in Darwin. Absolutely grow the game. I reckon there should be games up there, but maybe you actually look at the teams that are playing 16 or 17 games at the MCG, get them to grow the game in Darwin.
Melbourne have done it in the past.
Just to follow up to your question, my guess, according to AFL tables, the last time Collingwood had under 50,000 for a game at the MCG was round 9, 2023. It was the sexy Sunday 4:40 slot, and they were playing GWS. The crowd was just 37,631.
Fair.
So there you go.
Fair enough.
There's the answer.
Anyway, that's what I think is an issue that the AFL should take on board. They're trying to grow the game in the opening round, but if you're going to be fair income about it, grow the game by having consistency.
Surely the Northern Territory government could make it like, can't they do deals with? They used to have a deal with like a Melbourne or a North Melbourne just be like, come play your 2 games in Darwin, make it a 2. Like, it's a smart way that Suns do it by having those 2, not in terms of
for what though?
Not in terms of football, in terms of like it's a tour. We're here for a week. We can do promotions, play 2 games, but it's probably best suited by another club. I agree with you.
And maybe the Gold Coast football department actually don't mind it because they win up there. But I'm just talking about growing the game on the Gold Coast, and we saw a good crowd. There was a good crowd. I reckon half an hour before the game started, there was no one there, and you think, oh, this is going to be terrible. But maybe they were on the beach. But a good crowd actually fronted up. Yeah. But I think you've just got to build on this and have that consistency. So I just think... and the AFL gets smacked for a lot of things, and so this is just something I think worth focusing on a bit more. Play more games.
Valid point.
The most thankless tasks in football.
Oh, absolutely.
And if anyone, I've been saying this for years, if you're calling for fairness and equity in the fixture, it is the most commercially compromised document in world sport, the AFL fixture. And I reckon for what it's worth, it's mostly pretty reasonable.
They do a great job. To be fair or give a concession to the Gold Coast, they may even request it. That they play the games for some extra cash. But the AFL fund the Gold Coast anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think the AFL would demand that you are playing in Darwin. I think they should just stay and play more games.
But we also have that thing with the other expansion team with GWS. They play in Canberra. Does it make sense that they also give up games to Canberra when they should be based in their location?
So they go have a 6-week period where they're on the road.
Show.
Yeah, they should play their bigger games. Again, if we're talking about the Collingwoods and that sort of stuff, play at the SCG.
Okay, but then NG stadiums, that'll be used twice a year if they're playing Canberra and the SCG.
No, but probably don't sell as many to Canberra.
Right.
Again, you're trying to grow the game in that area. If you're trying to grow the game in Canberra, play one there, but play other teams there. I mean, we're trying to get these clubs up and going, and that is an issue. Crowds at NG Stadium,
it's hard.
They hardly play there.
Yeah.
So how do you get in the rhythm of every second week going there and playing games? I think it's something.
Whereas Canberra's always sold out when they play there,
and they love their footy and shouldn't take games away from Canberra. But I don't know whether it's the Giants' job to grow the game in Canberra.
Interesting. Anything else to take over from the weekend?
I don't know whether it's an unpopular opinion.
Go on.
Loved Ross Lyon's spray at quarter time.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
The old school.
I've seen some negative feedback on that on the weekend. I think it's fair what he's done. You play an AFL footy, and I know it was a 16 game or whatever, but as he said in his press conference after the game, at some point you can only say it so many times. There was clearly an issue with him manning up Lachie Neale when Lachie Neale stayed forward. And he got to the point halfway through the second quarter where he said, enough's enough, you're off, you're out. And yeah. I think the point's made, and maybe, but let me tell you, AFL footy's hard. It's not easy, hard. And you're going to cop a spray between the eyes.
And I think you can't go, the old school 80s when I started, where it was spray after spray, how do you create changes, give someone a cook? But then that evolved from those years to Lee Matthews, who just didn't give you a spray because he felt that he's not going to get a positive reaction with a cook, which was quite amazing because he changed enormously from his Collingwood days. But I just think periodically a bit of a reset with a cook.
Every now and then.
Absolutely.
Question for you, Tom, because obviously, Lynchy, as you mentioned, you started in the 80s. David Parkin was your coach, and he probably sprayed you as you met him.
I don't know whether he knew my name, actually, for the first 6 months.
How early on in your career in your AFL career, did you cop a spray? So Vossi was your first coach. When did Vossi give you, how far into your career did you really cop it?
No, I copped it a fair bit. When I won my first best and fairest, I came back the first day of pre-season. He said he'll never treat me the same, which I didn't think was fair. He said he's going to be harder on me, and I probably wasn't mature enough to accept that on the chin as a 21-year-old. So,
what year did you win it?
2011.
Okay,
so, 12, I felt like I got smacked every week. Didn't matter if I played well or not. So there was a bit of that, and that was my immaturity on that front, not being able to accept that. I understand why he was doing it. He didn't want me to get ahead of myself, wanted me to get the best out of myself. I didn't see it that way at the time, but looking back. But yeah, early on, there was a game against Melbourne. Jade Rawlings gave me both barrels. I had a really good game, but gave a couple of free kicks away against Melbourne. We lost by a kick, and we didn't win too many games of footy. I think I gave away a 50-metre penalty against Brad Green. And, so, you need to be in check. I mean, when you start your career as well, you're probably not going to get cooks because you're still educating, but you're going to find your way in and out of the team. And that's just part and parcel of it. So you've got to adapt to it, get used to the feedback. I don't think we ever did a Robert Walls. I think, what year was it? Was it 95 when Carlton got smashed and they had to stand there for an hour with their arms up?
Oh, I don't know.
Training.
There was something like that.
They went on to win the flag.
Okay. I was more thinking when you said Robert Walls when they got the boxing gloves out on Shane Stremple at training or that kind of thing.
Mid-80s. I actually, because I struggled with some health problems and injuries when Wolsey was coaching me at Brisbane, and we get on very well now. But I remember coming in after a game, and I think you think one of those games where you've played fairly well in a loss, and you sort of
think you're okay.
You're okay. Yeah. So you sit in the front row thinking, well, I should be right here. I've kicked 5, and he got the crosshairs on me and give me a good cook.
Was that the best spray you ever got? There you go. Question whether that was best spray you ever got.
Well, yeah, probably. The one I can remember, I forget a lot of things, and it come more regularly. I remember Robert Shaw kicked the drinks bucket all over everyone in a halftime address one day, and actually Wolsey Wolsey when he went to Richmond, was coaching at Richmond, was playing against Brisbane, and I think I'd returned. Yeah, I'd made a comeback after my health issues, and he sent the Richmond runner out to give me a cook. And so the Richmond runner's given me a spray, and I've given the Richmond runner a cook, and he's buckled and gone, oh, it wasn't me, it was Wolsey.
So, threw Wolsey under the bus.
Yeah, he did.
I don't think there's one that stands out. You're probably the same. I was a bit old school. I grew up in the country, so you're used to it. So you get it and you move on. You understand why the coach has given it to you, where I think nowadays, because they're so rare, like the weekend when Ross Lyon gives some pretty direct feedback, and it wasn't just the one, it was 2 or 3 of them on the bench, that we all blow up about it and we go, oh no, we've got to look after them. No, we don't. They're paid highly to go out there and perform, and if you need to give direct feedback in games, we've seen it a week before with Zorko and Fagan, which happens all the time only because they were there. I think I think you can reset really quickly off it. And it's about knowing your players. Sometimes you might have to wrap your arm around. Other times you might have to go whack.
And we saw another example of that different sort of context. We saw the way Ken Hinkley was speaking to Jason Horne-Francis when he was fired up at three-quarter time, trying to just calm him down. It wasn't a spray, but it was a sign of how a coach handles a player.
There's different modes, and rest assured that in the if Rossi was individualising at times, there'll be follow-ups.
Yeah.
So there's follow-ups today or tomorrow, the arm around, sort of to balance it up. But that's in the heat of the moment, direct feedback. Actually, I mean, sometimes when you're playing poorly, I actually used to enjoy almost a reset with a bit of a spray. So, all right, that's all cleared. Now we get back into it, sort of thing. So I used to enjoy a spray, not too often, but
not all the time.
Not all the time.
Completely different environment, but in my professional career, I copped some sprays. Well, there's one was very public, but I copped some early on from like Lee Simon. Legendary Triple M producer at FM guy, and that was as good as a coach spray as well to help improve your job. Sometimes in certain high pressure environments, a spray, and then you just. It's
I
okay.
got a spray from Lee Simon once.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. We'll triple.
And you remember, remember a Lee Simon spray. Hello, Lee, if you do listen to this podcast.
We'll triple M were commentating Brisbane Sydney game, and we were up and about, sort of triple M style, and we just didn't think there was a lot of animation next door in the ABC box. So we told our entire listening audience to flick across for a couple of minutes to have a listen.
I can hear the bat phone. I can see the studio hotline ringing from here.
Alarm bells going.
We thought they'd be coming back. Lee gave us a call the next morning.
I reckon that went down well.
Yeah, no.
I know the exact tone of call you would have got.
Well, let's say it wasn't a conversation. It was a one-way conversation. Yeah, that's right. You've told our entire audience to switch stations.
There you go.
Anyway.
Unpopular take. I think this is more a fun take than unpopular. It depends in which circles you're in. The father-son bloodline.
Yeah.
Now we here at Neds, obviously racing is our primary sport in our business, and you know if I'm going to the bloodstock sales, yearling sales, Magic Millions, and I want a good bloodline, I'm taking the Daicos bloodline over any football family right now.
You've just worked that out, have you?
No, I haven't just worked that out. But if you're going to have the conversation as to is Ablett Jr. the greatest father-son combination, or has Peter Daicos produced two absolute superstars, instant superstars?
But Ablett's would still be a long way in front.
Do you?
A long way in front.
Well, you know what you've got with Junior, Gaz Junior.
Yeah.
You can't honestly say that the Daicoses are in front of the Ablets yet.
They are very much getting close to it.
You're taking the mickey out of me, aren't you?
No. Well, it's unpopular opinions.
Senior's
It's not
probably the best of
Senior's
all
the
time.
greatest. Yep.
Well, Senior's
I'm talking in
the
terms
greatest
of
highlight
bloodline.
reel ever.
Senior's the greatest.
And
Junior just racked up 40 every week.
Potentially the best player we've seen
But
this century.
I'm talking in terms of Junior took about 5 years to get going, whereas Nick Daicos... his achievements in his first 5 years.
I'm not taking anything away from the Daicoses, but they've got a long way to go to get to the Ablets.
We know what Gaz Junior finished with.
We do know what Gaz Jr.
We don't know what these guys... We've got a fair idea of the way they're going.
I'm just sort of... I can see it being a thing. They're bloody good. I mean, both of them on Anzac Day, phenomenal. What Nick's done in his first few seasons compared to what Gaz Jr. did in his first...
Back to your point of father-sons and the feel good and love. I think... realistically, it should be one game. And people will jump up and down about that. And I know everything's compromised in the AFL. Anyway.
Yeah.
If your dad plays, or mum nowadays, play one game, I think you should be aligned to that club. And that club should get first crack at you.
Richmond
Because
could have Elijah Hollands then.
You live and breathe that club from when you grow up, and I imagine my boys probably a little bit different because they've got two clubs. Jack's sort of a little bit more Port Adelaide, but certainly coming around to Brisbane. They idolise that club, so you know that you've got a passion for the club. They play for the jumper, and I think you'd see probably less father-sons being traded away from their club. I know there's a lot coming through at Geelong. It's a luck of the draw a little bit. I think the feel-good and the love romance is one element of Australian rules footy we can keep.
And so I probably wouldn't go to one game, but
it used to be
50 games.
Yeah,
so that's how Jonathan Brown joined Brisbane on the 50 games.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great part. I mean, looking from a Tasmanian point of view with draft
Obviously
concessions.
not ideal.
Well, not ideal when you see the compromised drafts. So our first draft, what is it, October 27, if you look at last year's under 15 crop, and this is speculative and it will change, of the top 15, there will be 9 or 10 that are either father-son, NGAs or Northern Academies.
Yeah.
So it is compromised.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, the academy's obviously a side effect and different conversation.
Well,
but I think like Darcy at Bulldogs.
Well, that's 3 generations.
Like it's just
Well,
the Silvanis at
it's great.
Triple generation.
So-
I mean, it's wonderful. But
Well, on that then, you
Yeah.
talk about father-sons and what?
another bloodline I should mention at the moment, the Ashcrofts. That's another.
Yeah, well, I was going to touch on the Ashcrofts. So how good they are as players.
Yeah.
Has it been the worst list management mistake of the Gold Coast Suns in their history to not keep Marcus Ashcroft employed at the Gold Coast Suns? Because if he's still employed at the Gold Coast Suns in a football manager type role, the Ashcrofts are in the Gold Coast Academy and you are probably playing for where your dad works.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you're looking at
That's the
renegotiating with Marcus as they're coming into their draft.
That, of
year.
course, is the
just won't comment.
that's the Nick Blakey precedent, because that's how Nick Blakey ended up at Sydney.
Well, he could have been anywhere because he could have been in Brisbane.
He could have been in Brisbane,
trained at Brisbane, North.
Brisbane
Well,
or
his
North.
he was father-son to Brisbane,
And Academy Sydney, was it? They got
Academy
him?
Sydney
And
and,
aren't we-
North Melbourne.
Isn't
The
there
Gold
another-
Coast have made a lot of wrong decisions. Because
Yeah.
you look at the players that they've lost that they've gone on to win premierships. But, I mean, I think they...
But
I'm
could
not sure.
I know?
I asked Champs and he said, no, they've made the right
I
decision.
know.
Right.
I also know that
I just reckon
Luke Hodges'
it could
boy
have been nice.
Well, they could
is
end
in
up
the
at
Lions.
Brisbane.
Could end up at the Lions because he's in the Lions Academy and he's quite good.
Yeah.
So that'd go down well with the Hawthorn faithful if he.
You've
ends
got
up the
options.
Lions.
They've got
Yeah.
options these days. And that's
And-
what I just think.
And
Just the
St Kilda
Ashcroft boys would have been there.
Funny you mentioned St Kilda want the father-son scrapped because there's obviously something in the water at Moorabbin that's seen...
daughters.
Although I think Nick Rewalt, Lenny Hayes...
Montagna. There's a lot there still.
and Del Santo have boys. So
Yeah.
they should have a decent bloodline.
But the thing with it, and it's probably becoming more common now that the
Yeah.
kids are coming through and being really, really good players, they're not often that a father-son, the son turns out to be a star. Like, it's happening more now, but in history would tell us
There's been a few that
not
aren't.
that often. Like, there'd be some that roll in and, like even if the Ablets are a prime example, Nathan compared to Gary.
Yeah.
Like, Nathan just didn't have the dedication, premiership player, and could have potentially been a lot. But realistically, there's not a great deal of them.
But it reinforces as in a father-son situation. So as soon as those kids are born, you build a relationship, knowing that
I think they are starting
half
to do
a percent of them will be draftable. But you're building a base with great ambassadors that support your club. So then if Nick Blakey's got a great relationship with the Brisbane Lions through Johnny's Fitzroy days over a long period of time, he probably wants to come to
Well,
Brisbane.
he came out. He spent a bit of time at my house.
Who, Nick?
Yeah. No, he did. A few of them came up when they were sort of 16.
And
17,
I
they came
know
up.
clubs do hold father-son clinics. I have seen
So Richmond's just started it.
Yeah, I know. I saw North Melbourne have done it for a couple of years.
They've done it for a long time. But it's not father-sons, it's daughters as well.
Well, obviously, and that's the other thing too in the future, not only because there is father-daughter, Isabella Grant, and there's Andy Mackay's daughter plays in the AFL, but in the future, we're going to have the mother-son rule.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know Daisy, look, who knows but like Daisy Pearce has got 2 twin boys. If they're as good as his mum football-wise, Melbourne will want to recruit them.
Yeah, no, there's opportunities everywhere.
Yeah, and well, the thing, if your club does it really well and has good past players' days or old boys' days and you get all the kids there and you do that, then they've got the affiliation with the club and grow up loving that club.
And at the very least, that past player is a great ambassador for your club out there
That's
because
exactly right.
the way your family's engaged. So I think that's the first step. Yeah, and a lot of clubs are doing it much better now.
Yeah, it's genuinely highlight. One more thing before we go to our next segment, I'd love to get your thoughts on. There was an article in The Age this morning. Peter Ryan has written a...
Good man, Pete.
He's a good man, Pete. He wrote a fascinating article sort of highlighting the pay and conditions and sacrifices that assistant coaches have to make.
Disgraceful.
Under the soft cap conditions, and it highlighted your former assistant coach at Port Adelaide, Chad Corns, and what he has to put through the extra hours. Tate Cashler, is it Tate Cashler at the Gold Coast Suns, and Daniel Pratt from the Western Bulldogs, and it just points out the things like, assistant coaches are regularly working 70 plus hours a week. Their days off are now still spent watching the Rezzies. They're coding games late at night. They haven't had a pay rise for over 10 years. It sounds like a pretty awful. Well, you've got to really love football.
There's no incentive. Yeah. There's no incentive to go and be an assistant coach unless you have the vision of being a senior coach.
Which most would to start with.
I think so.
You think would have a crack.
Realistically, you're not going to ever get there. I think the pay conditions need to increase rapidly for assistant coaches. I know that the senior coach is going to start to fall outside the cap, but the senior coach will always go in. Like their job's on the line. But days off, you're relying on your assistant coaches for the young kids if you want to get better. So you go in and do extras with young kids. I've heard stories of Giants assistant coaches sleeping in vans because they can't afford the rent there.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So they sleep in the car park. They buy a van, sleep in the car park. A lot of their assistants, they won't take their families up there. So the Giants and Sydney, probably harder than most, they'll move up into a one-bedroom apartment, pay through the roof.
I think Murray Davis has moved to
Adelaide
by himself.
Yeah, it's just so hard. And look,
David Noble did it to North Melbourne, I reckon, to start with, left the family.
It's a great job to be involved in AFL footy, but I think they're being left behind, assistant coaches, and they need a rapid pay increase, I think, because they impact footy careers probably as much as anyone else. Because if you get a good assistant that invests time, particularly when you get into the system, they can potentially take you on the path.
And it's also the emotional support role they play. You know, they're the ones that will host dinners or house them, be a sort of father figure.
The prime example of what we spoke about before with Ross Lyon giving the clip, it's the assistant coach that will do the work to pick it up, to pick up and wrap his arms around that kid, so get him back. But Ross will clearly follow up, but it's the assistant coach. So they're the ones that are doing most of the... And that's why...
The teaching after the...
Yeah.
So that's what they do at the...
And that's why the clubs...
All clubs.
Best clubs have those relationships. Their assistant coaches are good.
So, Tom, you're a more recent retiree. Did you consider, when you were looking at life post-football coaching?
Yeah, I almost went to Port as a midfield with Brent Montgomery. Chris Davies was keen to get that. But it wasn't... I had nothing to do with pay. I was ready just to get out of the system.
Okay.
But being in an interstate club, I think, is different because you travel every second week. I just had a second kid. It was time for me to...
knowing your lifestyle now and knowing what an assistant coach goes through, that doesn't sound like a job you'd want to sign up for.
No, I wouldn't have thought.
High finance
Finance
broker
Rockliff
now.
Finance, Neds,
Triple M, bit of everything.
But and you get to be a premiership coach at the school.
So the thing with assistant coaches is that. So you're an interstate coach, your weekend's gone, so you play on that, say, let's do Brisbane for instance. They play on Saturday afternoon against St Kilda. Every coach gives their laptop to the IT department. On the plane the whole way home they're coding, so you got 2 hours to code on the way home. Get home at midnight.
What's the 10-second overview of coding for those that don't know?
So it goes through play-by-play and you're looking at all your players. So
vision logging.
Midfield coach would look behind the goals and in play and code, this is your pattern that you've ran. So they follow every single play. And then at least 6 hours on Sunday doing the same thing. Yeah. Roll into a Monday morning at 6 a.m. You've got to do the full review, everyone show their edits. And then by the time they get to Monday afternoon, they're presenting the review. And in the background, the week before, they've already done edits for the game coming up because Tuesday you're on to the next opposition. So it's just a cycle that's
extraordinary.
It's a lot of paperwork.
Well, a lot of computer, not so much paperwork,
well, you know what I mean.
On the screen, and so the balance of their work-life balance is not there.
Yeah,
and then they've got to try and Tuesday train with the players, be out there on the field doing all that stuff. take the players in, individual reviews, and then it's just a spiral.
So
it keeps spinning.
we have a coaches association.
Do we? Because
well, I'm about to say, like, if you're meant to lobby for the health, well-being and welfare for a coaches association, like, what are you doing?
I don't think it's great.
What's the point of that?
Well, the soft cap's ridiculous. And, like, especially in Victoria, people got smashed with COVID. The coaches, had a 30% pay cut and 30% cut on headcount as well. So, especially through the COVID period, that, again, was tough for everyone. But you had assistant coaches working ridiculous hours and away from families, and one didn't know whether they were going to get the flick, and if they didn't get the flick, they were getting a 30% pay cut. Sure. It's an all-encompassing role.
What action can you take? Like, if you're like, going to show my old roots here, are you going to go on strike? Is assistant coaches going to say we can't take this anymore?
But you need the strong. You need the coaches, the senior coaches, and your CEOs to stand up for the assistant coaches to get some life balance, because it is all consuming during the footy season. Absolutely, they get better time off now, but rest assured that this is when you're appointing a coach, you're not just appointing the individual. We're not pitching to you. No. We're pitching to the family, because it does impact on families. So that's what you've got to create a lifestyle where you can actually enjoy it and thrive through that period.
You lose a lot of great minds from the game as well. Prime example is Simon Black, because he hated the coding. So he's not involved as a coach. He's out. You've got...
So sure, you can get someone else to code for you. You can't have Simon Black in the middle of the night coding.
Well, you've got this, and you cross the board. You look at the players in the media now, like Nick Riewold's a great footy mind. He's not involved. Luke Hodge. And I know that media, and they probably don't need it as much, but you lose all these guys because the conditions, there's no incentive for them to stay involved and be an assistant coach.
Wrap up this chat shortly, but Lynchy, obviously, from a Tasmanian perspective, not only have you got to attract a senior coach, but you've got to attract assistant coaches. How hard would it be for you when you're setting up the Devils and you've got to get, because I don't know what the coaching talent is already in people in Hobart, but you've got to get people to relocate, ideally, and they've got to be faced with those conditions when you're setting up a new football club. And I would have thought one thing you would have learnt from other expansion clubs is the role of the assistants would have played with like young kids at GWS and Gold Coast. So how do we make it a great place to work for you?
Rest assured, the biggest thing with attraction and retention is local talent. Yeah. So you want to grow that to start with. But the reality is, to start with, especially, and when you talk about the soft cap, there is going to be, when you're bringing in a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds in those first couple of years especially, you need to you probably need to have a bigger soft cap, because you've got to put extra assistant coaches, extra development coaches, extra welfare managers, extra psychs to support them.
You nearly need double.
Yeah, absolutely, to support them. So what I said before, so every position, whether it's an assistant coach or someone in your football department or a commercial person who's coming down from Melbourne or Queensland or whatever, it is a pitch about work-life balance, and you're presenting to the family. Yeah. So you've got to create an environment where it's a combination of lifestyle, it's a combination of cost of living, it's a combination of who you're going to work with in that environment. So it is a challenge, but it's so far away from what it used to be, whereas I'm going to offer you 150 grand to come down and work 9 days a week. Yeah. So it's advanced on that, and that's where I suppose as a startup club you got to do it different and you got to do it better. So, I mean, clubs are evolving, but certainly at a startup you got to present a compelling package to get people and their families over the line.
It's certainly an eye-opening article. So if you do get the chance, have a look at Peter Ryan's yarn about assistant coaches in The Age. We're going to go to our next segment and wrap up. This is AFL Unpopular Opinions here on Neds. Time to wrap up here on AFL Unpopular Opinions. Dylan Leach, Tom Rockliff and Alastair Lynch with you. Gentlemen, round 8. Round 8 already. Would you believe that? We're already, a quarter and a bit through the season. What are we looking forward to this weekend? There are some cracking matches.
Oh, yeah, I think there's a great weekend of footy. You can't go past the last game of the weekend, though. Q Clash, particularly for us being here in Queensland. Second v third, effectively the top of the table clash. See how much the Gold Coast Suns are matured. Brisbane as well. We know this was a game last year where Chris Fagan was sort of at a crossroads whether he continued or not.
Was that Logan Morris's debut as well?
Logan Morris, they
lost one, was it? Yeah.
Fresh from McDonald's and the VFL. And
lost a few through ACLs, and they touched up the Gold Coast Suns when the Gold Coast were going pretty well.
Was that Bruce's debut as well? Did you present the jumper that much?
I don't think so. Maybe. Okay. I can't remember if it was that game or not. But yeah, they got the job done, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to that one.
It is a big one. Nowhere near the level, but the other local derby in Sydney GWS, neither club flying against the expectations. Certainly Sydney Swans have dropped off with a few injuries as well, but the Giants just...
they disappointing on Saturday.
They were disappointing.
Yeah.
So they've got to bounce back hard. But yeah, real concerns for the Sydney Swans. I think it's probably for everyone, they're the most disappointing team this year. I mean, Goulden being out does leave a hole, but and shouldn't leave that much of a hole.
We were talking kits earlier. Whenever GWS plays the Swans, they wear that charcoal kit, the black kit. That's one of the best kits in football right now.
It's a good kit.
So if we're talking fashion. A few other things this weekend. Hawthorn celebrates 100 years in the AFL VFL. They've got a big celebration game on Sunday.
So it's an invitation to every past player to come back to the event.
Yep.
What about the household names that will be rolling there? You think some of those icons?
Yeah. Are we going to? Is this where we just name niche Hawthorn players from back in the day, or we're talking like actually lower Hawthorn legends?
Absolute greatest of all times.
Who?
Hudson, Matthews, these sort of guys.
Brereton.
Was for some reason.
Daniel Harford.
We're talking about some of the stories that Lee Matthews was once talking about, and the boys in a match committee meeting talking about the most disposals that they had, and I think someone sort of said, "Oh, you would have had 45, Lee," and Lee's gone, "No, I only had 41." Kicked 11, but
no, that'll
41 11.
That'll be
what about the names?
They've had quite the certainly their second half of their 100 years has been amazing. The first
since the
80s. Since the 60s even, they've been pretty dominant.
Was it 69?
Hawthorn have won 71. Premierships. It's very classic hits radio. Hawthorn have won premierships in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and today.
Not this
decade, no, not yet. There's still 6 seasons to go. And Bulldogs in Port Adelaide, in Ballarat, that'll also be a cracker.
Cold.
Yeah, you played in Ballarat, didn't you?
Can blow up there.
Joint.
Where are you from?
I'm from Benalla.
Yeah.
It's a bit warmer.
No.
The wind blows there.
Yeah.
That was the coldest I've ever been when we played at Ballarat. I reckon it was 2 degrees at the first bounce.
The other thing too,
snowing.
I was going to do this, I'll condense it, but Friday night, St Kilda and Fremantle. Now, you might think it's a bit of a nothing fixture between these two clubs, but let me tell you, boys, when St Kilda and Fremantle play, weird shit happens. They've been, ever since like their very first meeting, there is a history of just weird stuff happening when St Kilda and Freo play. And it's not bad for two clubs with a premiership total of 1. But when these two players, these are the things that have happened in the history of St Kilda playing Fremantle. So in their first ever meeting, which was an Ansett Cup game in 1995. This is like the first time everyone's ever seen Fremantle. St Kilda plays Freo in Freo, and Lazar Vidovic decides to go to town and strike Brendan Crummell and Matthew Burton. He gets 6 weeks for it. So the first time they ever meet, it's rather violent. The other moments include when St Kilda play Freo.
Did Crummell play for Fremantle as well?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
He'll be at
play
the
for Hawthorn and West Coast as well.
Well, he might be there on Sunday. The other thing. Umpire Peter Carey took the mark. Your old teammate Jasper's dad, Adrian Fletcher, kicked it to him.
Laced him out.
Who played that day? St Kilda and Fremantle.
Yep.
Malcolm Blight coached a winning Saints team against Fremantle. So Malcolm Blight was only coach of St Kilda for 15 matches, 2 wins. One of them was against Freo. In the same week, Freo sacked Damien Drum. And Damien Drum found out from Adrian Barrett, who just told him he'd been fired. So he found out from the media. So that was chaotic. The other one, Whispers in the Sky. Do you remember this? 2005, Justin Longmuir, the now Fremantle coach, kicks the sealer.
Winning goal.
From a controversial free kick. On the plane back, Chompers, Tony Jones, is in business class, as he is, with the umpires, and he hears Matthew Head, the then umpire, say, well, he alleged that he heard Matthew Head say that, now I know what a win feels like, because the then St Kilda coach Grant Thomas, you won't believe this, was quite critical of the umpiring in the AFL. He's not like it these days, but that was quite scandalous at the time. Then the following year, the two met in Launceston. Siren Gate. Now, if there's one thing you're going to make sure that you happen at the Tasmanian stadium is that everyone will hear the siren at the new stadium. But we all know what happened in Siren Gate. The umpires didn't hear the siren. St Kilda was awarded a free kick. There was a point. The Saints had won by a point. Fremantle protested the result. And it's one of the few games that's ever been overturned by the AFL Commission. So we've had an umpire mark. We've had whispers in the sky. We've had Siren Gate. But there's more. A NAB Cup game got delayed because there was flooding indoors at Marvel Stadium. And I'm not talking Ross Lyon tactics. I'm talking genuine flooding. So it got delayed by 45 minutes. So weather got involved. And then Ross Lyon, the year later, does one of the great dramatic coaching turnarounds of all time, and just all of a sudden he's coach of Fremantle.
That was massive.
Well, probably the biggest coaching change ever.
Biggest surprise, I would have thought.
Biggest surprise.
Mark Harvey was pretty happy about it.
Yeah. Mark went down well. Another thing, round 23, 2013. This is the reason we have the pre-finals bye, because Ross Lyon decided to rest most of his good Fremantle players as they play the Saints in the final round. The Saints belt them. Fremantle miss out on a home final, and then Ross comes back to St Kilda. So it is like the Freo Saints history. It's where weird shit happens. What weird shit?
Weird shit.
This is where
Keep an eye out Friday night.
Keep an eye out Friday night for some weird shit. Could be interesting.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, Freo and St Kilda has some odd stuff happening with those two clubs.
Weird shit.
And they'll change that Ross Lyon buy stuff. That'll be changed.
Well, that's
next
Ross.
year.
That's Ross and Brad Scott's legacy.
Yeah.
Done.
They're not going
You
to
heard
have
it here first.
Pre-grand final.
Yeah, pre-grand final. Yeah, I reckon.
Common sense.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to have it this year because, of course, Gold Coast and Essendon need to play that catch-up game,
Yes, my word.
which will be interesting. Hey, we're going to wrap up. Thank you. Rocky, you've got the snapshot coming up tomorrow. Is there a juicy multi?
8-1 this week.
Hey, got to get the wins.
Hands and heels, just
Just get it
Just
done.
get the win.
Get the wins.
Beautiful.
I will catch you all next week.
Look forward to it.
We'll catch you then.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website